Hello, everybody, and welcome to History Bite number 222, dated April 3rd, 2021. I'm Walter, your mobile historian and blue-collar scholar. This History Bite is entitled, How the United States Acquired Alaska. Most Americans know that Alaska is America's largest state in total area. It is twice the size of Texas, all right? More than 580,000 square miles of land, all right? It is also one of the most underdeveloped states in the country, all right, with a great percentage of it inaccessible by car. Indeed, Alaska is America's last frontier, yet it is a beautiful state that still retains most of its natural beauty unaffected, by the hands of man. Alaska, however, was not always in America's hands, as I'm sure you already know at this point. Indeed, Alaska was originally a Russian colony. All right? Russians were the first Europeans to settle in what is now Alaska. All right? With the very first of them going there, roughly around the 1720s, all right, primarily for hunting and fishing purposes, all right? And over the course of the next 60 years, they begin to settle, in the areas that would eventually become the new colony known as Russian America in 1799. So then we see the beginning of what would eventually become Alaska, all right? So Russian America, all right, as it was known at that time, was Russia's only viable and real colony in North America, all right? It never had a huge population of Russians, but they certainly made their mark, marks that still exist to this day, with many Orthodox churches still remaining in Alaska, reminding individuals of the original Russian heritage. All right. The colony was decently profitable for many years. All right. Until around the 1840s and 1850s, when that profitability began to decline with, the fur trade and sea otter population beginning to decline more than what would have been expected. All right. So with that in mind, and with Russia's recent defeat in the Crimean War against Great Britain and France, the Russian Empire was financially strapped, and they needed money, all right? And they figured one good way to raise money was to get rid of the unprofitable colony of Russian America, all right? So another motive behind them wanting to get rid of Russian America was to keep the colony out of British hands, all right? Great Britain and Russia at this time were fierce rivals, and they would rather sell the territory than have it seized by Britain and, be unable to recapture it, all right? Russian America was in a very bad spot for Russia to be fighting, because it was all the way on Russia's Pacific coast, and, it certainly was not very much worth fighting for, to say the very least. Even though it wasn't worth fighting for, the Russians, like any country, had a sense of national pride and did not want to lose it militarily to the Brits. The irony here is that the Brits had no interest in the region whatsoever. They already had enough uncharted wilderness to deal with Canada, which of course is immediately to the right of Alaska, right? It's one landmass, all right, with Alaska being all the way to the northwest, all right, far northwestern portion of North America. Brits had no interest in the region, denied. They had no taste for it, so Russia was effectively panicking over nothing, all right? But nonetheless, they still wanted to sell it, regardless of British motives, to raise capital, all right? So in around 1857, they approached the United States of America. Let's see what the Americans were giving on this. Would the Americans be interested in buying Alaska from them? All right. So under the direction of Tsar Alexander II, the Russian government entered into negotiations with the United States on the purchase of the land. Of course, this is, as we know, a bad time in American history. We've got the whole Civil War thing, soon to be coming up, and we've got a lot of sectional tension in the country at this point. So our attention is not really focused on Alaska, all right, or Russian America. So negotiations didn't go very far at this point, and that coupled with America's very low offer for the territory, $5 million, which the Russians were like, it's not that profitable, but I mean, damn, you could give a little more than that. So, negotiations stalled, and with the, commencement of the Civil War in 1861, the U.S., negotiations fell off altogether. With the end of the Civil War, however, in 1865, negotiations resumed, at the urging of Tsar Alexander II, all right? And as a result of that, 2 years later, they formally got back underway in 1867 between U.S. Secretary of State William Henry Seward and the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Edward de Stockel. All right. So negotiations between Seward and de Stockel went very well. It was a passionate process between the two, and ultimately a treaty was worked out. All right. With the resumption of negotiations in March of 1867, de Stockel and Seward, along with others, managed to formulate a treaty that was signed between the two on March 30th, 1867. All right. The treaty would provide that the United States of America would pay $7.2 million for the colony of Russian America. Okay, roughly 2 cents an acre for 586,400 square miles of vast uncharted wilderness for all intents and purposes. All right. Now, of course, this was all fine, well, and good, but treaties under our Constitution have to be ratified by the U.S. Senate. So, thereby the matter, all right, was taken up by U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Chair Charles Sumner of the great state of Massachusetts. Sumner was suspicious of the treaty and the purchase of Alaska in general. As most Americans, including Sumner himself, knew little to nothing about this vast, faraway land. All right. So with that in mind, Sumner, being the academic scholar that he was, buried himself in books, maps, and histories about Alaska. All right, learning every single solitary detail that he could about this territory. All right. And by the time all of his research was complete, he would deliver to the U.S. Senate a very formidable 3-hour lecture on why the Alaska Purchase Treaty should be ratified. All right. Obviously, Sumner's speech was very, very compelling, as the U.S. Senate would on April 9th, 1867, ratify the Alaska Purchase Treaty by a vote of 37-2. All right. Well within the constitutional requirements. Okay. With that in mind, the United States would alter the name of the territory from Russian America to Alaska, all right, which is an Aleut word, all right? The Native Americans who live in the region are known as the Aleut, along with others as well. And this was more or less a deference to the indigenous inhabitants of the region, okay, not per se their wishes, but a deference to the inhabitants per se in their traditional language and culture. Okay? But with that in mind, as with all things, not everyone was exactly enthusiastic, about this. Okay? Now, Many people, very suspicious, not all, a vast majority of the American public approved of the purchase, but many people essentially thought we were getting gypped by Russia. You know, we got a whole bunch of crazy names on the Alaska purchase, such as Seward's Folly or Walled Russia or Seward's Icebox, okay? You know, other people called it President Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden, okay? Another editorial referred to Alaska as a sucked orange, okay? And except for the Aleutian Islands and a narrow strip of land along the southern coast of Alaska, frankly, the territory wasn't even worth taking as a gift if the Russians gave it to us, all right? Because Alaska was, you know, perceived as a vast frozen wilderness. What are we buying? A bunch of polar bears, grizzly bears, moose, ice, snow. I mean, $7 million on this? What a waste of taxpayer money, all right? Granted, this was the minority perspective. Most Americans did approve of the purchase, all right? And, you know, the treaty was officially signed after the Senate ratified it by President Andrew Johnson on the 28th of May, 1867, all right? So we've got dates covered here. You know, the treaty was adopted on the 30th of March, 1867. It was ratified by the Senate on April 9th, 1867, and signed by President Andrew Johnson on May the 28th, 1867. The formal transfer of Alaska from Russia to the United States took place on the 18th of October, 1867, in the town of Sitka, all right, which was accompanied by a parade of Russian and American soldiers, all right? The Russian soldiers took down the Russian flag for the last time at the governor's house, and the American flag was raised. Accordingly, Alaska ceased to be Russian and became American. All right? So, with the American acquisition of the territory, most of the Russians that were living there decided to go home, you know, not wanting to live under American rule. And those who chose to remain could obviously apply for American citizenship. Okay? Now, with all these things in mind, okay, Alaska fulfilled the promise of the detractors for arguably the first 30 years after it was acquired, all right, as outside of its, you know, seal fisheries, you know, and other aquatic life, Alaska was not exactly, you know, a cash cow. And it would not be a cash cow until the 1896 Klondike Gold Strike, okay? You know, that's when Alaska was truly viewed as a wise purchase, you know, something we finally getting a return on our investment, all right? You know, the whole motive behind America wanting to buy Alaska from Russia was to increase its, you know, military presence in the Pacific and towards Asia, as well as to expand its economic presence in the region through trade, all right? All of which were accomplished with the purchase of the colony from Russia, all right? So after the U.S. acquired Alaska from Russia, you know, the territory went through several types of administration, all right? It was known as the Department of Alaska from 1867 until 1884. In 1884, it became known as the District of Alaska, a status it held until 1912. At that point, it became known as the Territory of Alaska, a designation it held until 1959. Okay, Alaska's strategic importance was certainly seen during World War II, and as such, on January 3rd, 1959, Alaska became America's 49th state. Okay? Just for the record, October 18th is celebrated in Alaska as Alaska Day, an official state holiday commemorating the day that Alaska formally transferred from the authority of Russia to the United States. Okay? So that, folks, is how the United States acquired Alaska. All right? So let's go through those dates one more time just for your reference. All right? On March 30th, 1867, the U.S. and Russia agreed to a treaty. All right? The Alaska Purchase Treaty to buy the land. All right? America would buy Alaska for $7.2 million. A bargain basement deal. Indeed. All right? On April 9th, 1867, that treaty was ratified by the U.S. Senate. Okay? On May 28th, 1867, the treaty was signed by President Andrew Johnson. And on October 18th, 1867, the formal transfer of Alaska from Russia to the United States took place. All right? So that's how the U.S. acquired Alaska. If you have any questions or controversies, leave them down below, and I'll be happy to answer them. You know, I appreciate you for listening to this video. If you enjoyed it and learned a thing or two, drop me a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. You know, if you've not subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would greatly appreciate that. If you do so right now, just hit that little red subscribe button and we'll be in business, all right? And if you'd like to donate financially to my channel, I would graciously appreciate that. Again, thank you all for listening. Take care, stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you at the next bite. Have a great day.